Hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday, y'all. Happy Monday, and welcome to Faith, Purpose, Profit, FPP Live, a time I connect all things faith with purpose and profit. And yes, you need all three. I'm Nicole Roberts Jones, the Bankroll You Brands expert, and always humbled, blessed, and excited to be here to pour into you. So as you're coming in, hey, Alzada. Hope I said your name right. Come on in, say name and where you're joining from. So my goal in doing these conversations on Monday is the one thing I think so many people leave out, especially faith-based folk, is faith when you're growing your business. And so the one thing that I know for sure is God really put this on my heart as I was beginning my own business. And so I want you to know everything I teach you, I thought God was just teaching me the lesson for me. So I dig deep for me and then he tells me to teach it. And so I'm so excited to continue with a six-part series tonight. The six-part series is called Why Your Business is Important to God. Why Your Business is Important to God. And we're here at part four, which is God wants you to be rich. God wants you to be rich. I said it. Now, if you've been in my camp for a while, you know I've been saying that, your purpose is meant to profit. Well, I'm up leveling that conversation. And so I'm going to tell you why. But before I start to give a review on the first three parts as we get into part four, before we do any of that, let me explain to you, those of you that haven't heard my story, let me tell you why I'm passionate about what I teach. I'm not someone that just talks the talk, someone that studies it and then just teaches it. I'm a living, breathing example of every single thing that I teach you. So, again, if you haven't heard my story, I've been in this work since 1993, September of 1993 to be exact. So, I'm almost at my 29th anniversary. So, as of this moment, it's been 28 years. And so, some 17 years into me starting my business, starting the thing I knew I was called to do. So, by 2010, my business was a place I saw on my vision board, even though vision boards weren't out yet. It was everything I had visioned. So back then, I had two divisions in my business. I had a nonprofit and a for profit. So, in my nonprofit, working with African American teenage girls, it was a faith based program based on purpose. Of course, y'all know me. That program had 10 chapters in 10 churches in 10 cities throughout the country. And we were growing by leaps and bounds. In my for profit division, I was coaching at the time highly skilled professional women. I do coach a few good men. So, men, I'm not leaving you out. But back then, I was only focused on women. And so in that division, I had a maxed out coaching client roster, meaning I couldn't take another client. So I thought, maybe I should write a book. So in 2010, my first book came out, and I thought, I can give the principles to women I can't take on as a client while it raises money for my nonprofit working with my teenage girls. But when that book came out, I started getting invitations to speak all over the country. Now, hold tight. This does make sense to why God wants you to be rich. I trust and believe it's going to be full circle if you hang with me. So, 10 chapters, 10 cities throughout the country, probably like 10 states, maybe it was 9 states of my nonprofit. I had 100% maxed out coaching count roster working with highly skilled professional women looking to start or grow their purpose focused businesses. I wrote my book in 2010, my first book. And then I started getting invitations to speak all over the country. So listen, I had gotten my business to the place I dreamed of, and I loved every minute of it. But I want you to get this. I was only generating $13,000 in my business. I said 13,000. So I really pretty much had community service because I wasn't making enough money to work my business for a time. I felt like I had a big fat purpose, a big fat calling with no money attached to it. So of course, I had a daytime job to pay for my nighttime calling. And I remember my epiphany moment like it was yesterday, because I sure was not functioning like God wanted me to be rich. In full disclosure, by the way, if you guys see me itching, I have mosquito bites. Love mosquitoes. So I really want you to understand this. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was November 7th, 2010. I had just gotten home from another speaking weekend, speaking at a women's symposium, a church empowerment event, some entrepreneurial conference. And it was Sunday night, my class. Oh, by the way, my daytime job, I got to tell you guys this. I was an adjunct professor at the time at Boston University. My class was at 8 a.m. on Monday morning. So this is Sunday night. My class is the next morning. I hadn't looked at the syllabus. I know I hadn't read the books I told my students to read. I hadn't written out a lecture note. And I remember sitting on my couch, exhausted, thinking to myself, I can't do this anymore, and just ready to quit. But at the same time, I thought, how can I quit when I know this is my purpose? I know my this business that I'm really trying to get up and running so I can do it full time. I know I'm called to do this, but this little $13,000, yeah, this isn't cutting it. So I prayed, Lord, if this is really my purpose, I need you to show me something because this right here ain't working. Now, I didn't know my epiphany was happening, by the way. So I don't know if this happened a month later or 6 months later. I was a little mad at God at the moment. But I heard about an event. I went to that event. I met my coach at that event. I hired my first coach. By the way, that was the first time I ever invested in my purpose. That coach cost 30,000. I was only making 13,000. I'm telling you that because I couldn't afford it, but I couldn't afford not to do it. And my first coaching session, my coach pretty much showed me me. She began to show me all the ways that I was overlooking my gift. What I realize is we all have blind spots because you don't do what you do to you. So the things that are intrinsic to your DNA that you will never see, because again, you don't do what you do to you. I often tell my clients, you can't see the label from inside the jar. So to make a long story short, once my coach began to show me things about me that I would never be able to see, I started to see all the ways that I have been leaving transformation behind. I started to see all the ways that I really wasn't profiting. Now, when I say profiting is gain, yeah, for me, but ultimately it's gaining for the kingdom. So as I walk you through what I'm going to talk to you about in part 4 in this series, I need you to understand I'm a living, breathing example of what this looks like. So listen, let me tell you what God says to me in that moment. So in that moment, my business went from 13,000 to over 200,000, by the way, by me teaching you the things I'm going to teach you tonight or walk you through. And I said 30,000 to over 200,000. You heard me right. But here's the other thing. So and again, I don't know if this was the next week or the next month. All these things were happening so fast, I didn't keep up with it. Okay. So I remember a church calling me to come and speak. And I was like, really, Lord, why are you going to have a first lady from a church call me? Really? You truly trying to test me? See, before then, I had been going to speak for free. I didn't know my own worth. Whole lesson in and of itself. And so when the first lady asked me how much my speaking fee was, I listened to what my coach told me and I hushed and said the fee. And do you know what that first lady said? She said, okay, do you want to stay at the Embassy Suites or the Hilton? Is there a preferred airline? I'm like, what? So when I hang the phone up, I'm like, Lord, really? Here's what God said back to me. And some of y'all are going to need to write this down. Service and struggle should never coexist. Why would I give you a gift and want you to struggle to do it? And so when God showed me that, the very next thing he showed me was Genesis 1:28. I'm going to walk you through that. But what he began to peel back for me, not just that in what became probably 2012 by the time I got to that. So it's been 10 years since I got this lesson. I've been studying it ever since, and I'm growing more and more in it. And so what you guys get is the coach that gets to coach you so you don't have to make all the mistakes that I made, so it doesn't have to take you as long. But I also want you to understand that many of you are serving a struggle God. God didn't intend for you to be mediocre or average. He didn't intend for you to struggle. He gave you a gift so that it could profit and ultimately so that you could be rich. Oh, wait a minute, because you're probably thinking about rich in the wrong way. So first, before I start getting into that, let me break down the first 3 parts of this 6-part series tonight. This episode is part 4. Okay. So again, the series is called Why Business is Important to God. So part 1, I talked to you about really God was the first person to work. We looked at what dominion means and we looked at creation because, to create means, I'm looking at the definition, bringing something into existence to produce or bring about a course of action or behavior. So you heard me say to produce. I want you guys to get everything I'm teaching you in this series builds on the next. That's how I teach. Okay. So we looked at God, who was the first person to work because God could have thought it and it happened, but he decided to do it over 6 days, which meant he was working. Hello, work week. And then he took the 7th day off to rest, right? So Genesis 2:15 is what we looked at in that part 1. Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend to it and keep it, which is our mandate. You got something to tend to and keep, keep to. You got something to tend to and keep. That's God's mandate. And he doesn't want you to struggle to do it. So then we went into part two, which is what a relay teaches you about having a successful business. And we looked at it from a perspective of a relay race. Now, again, I'm not going through the whole. So if you missed any of these episodes, I want you to go back and listen to them. You can go to the FPP podcast. So you get part one and part two from all these episodes I'm going through. Okay, started with why business is important to God. Part two is what a relay teaches you about having a successful business. Because listen, a successful relay race is all about the handoff of the baton and the catch. If you've ever watched any kind of track meet. So God has handed off your purpose to you. Have you caught it? And then how are you even producing from that purpose, which is a call? See, God made each of us in his image. And so we looked at God making us in his image and what that means to the relay that we are each meant to run in this thing called life. That was part two. Part three is stop fighting the GPS. Now, what's interesting is so many of y'all, how many of y'all have a GPS, but you don't listen to the direction that it gives you? So that was our last part of this series. Again, stop fighting the GPS, or I can say your GPS, as we looked at how you abide and follow directions. Okay. And so we started looking at John chapter 15. I'm going to dig into that more in this part four. But here's what I want you to know. John, oh, by the way, we talked about three things you need to do. You must do to abide. So again, if you miss any parts of that, I want to encourage you to go back to fpppodcast.com and listen to those episodes because you're going to need all of what I teach in this series to ultimately get to all that God has for you and all the people that are attached to you. Okay. fpppodcast.com. Okay. So I really ended that series reading John 15:5, which says, and by the way, when you see me looking down, that means I'm reading a Bible verse. I'm reading a note to make sure I'm staying on track because y'all know I can talk for the next 6 hours. So I'm trying to stay focused. I could actually talk for the next 3 days straight, probably. Anyway, John 15:5 says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. So I'm going to take that Bible verse to the next level as we talk about God wants you to be rich, which ultimately is a call for you to bear fruit. Okay. Now y'all hang with me because let me tell you something. My business was struggling. I wasn't bearing no part of any kind of fruit. So here's where this comes from. And this was my mandate. When I learned this whole service and struggle should never coexist, and I started getting clear on my own assignment and how to really get it in a place where it produces. This is what God began to peel back for me. And this is why I teach faith, purpose, and profit, because you need all three. Okay. So Genesis 1:28. Now I'm not going to read the whole Bible verse. Those of you that have been with me, you know this is my call. Genesis 1:28, which says, God blessed them and said, I want you to be fruitful, multiply, and have dominion. So I talked about having dominion in part one of the series. Now I'm going to peel back fruitful and multiply. So here in part one, I'm going to focus on fruitful. We'll talk about multiplying in part two. Y'all with me? Okay. So again, God wants you to be rich. So roll with me so you understand what I mean by rich. I want you to let go of any tie you already had to what rich means, because that's half of our problem in this world. If I keep it all the way real, especially the church, keeps us in a place where we don't see rich the way God intends for us to see it, not the way the world wants us to see it, which is why we feel this guilt, this love-hate relationship with money. Okay. So peel back fruitful. Now, those of you that know me, you know what I'm going to do. Read definitions. So fruitful means producing good or helpful results. It means to be productive. By the way, this is according to Webster. Now, profit. Now, I always talk about, your purpose is meant to profit. Okay. So profit means a valuable return, a gain. Now, here's where rich takes it up a notch. Y'all ready? Rich means highly productive, having high value or quality. See, many of you guys are walking around like you a Capri when God created you to be a Bentley. Come on, somebody, because you don't know your worth. You don't know the brilliance you have hidden here. You don't know how smart you are, how gifted you are, how phenomenal you are. And so you sell yourself short. So again, if gain means valuable return, if profit means a valuable return, a gain, and rich means highly productive, and fruitful means producing good results. You guys see how rich takes it to a whole nother level of that? See, a focus on material is having abundant possessions. I'm not focused on that when I'm talking to you about being rich, and neither is God. He's looking at the gain and the value you give to the world. And when you have something that's valuable, why not increase it and multiply it? We'll talk about multiply tomorrow, but I want you guys to see this. So I want to focus on fruitful first. Because I think the problem, and I know for me, my problem was I wasn't fruitful. I wasn't producing any kind of good result. Okay. So our Bible verse focus for today is this John 15, 1 through 5, that says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. So let's look at that. But before we do that, you guys know how I do. I look this up in my study Bible. Y'all know I love me some Tony Evans commentary. I'm not going to read one part of this. It says this about this Bible verse. It says, God's goal for every Christian is to increase in fruit bearing. That's that rich, y'all. Increase in fruit bearing. We are to progress from producing no fruit to some fruit to more fruit to much fruit to remaining fruit. Fruitfulness is a life of spiritual usefulness and productivity for the good of others and the glory of God. Y'all with me? Are you getting this? So I really want you to understand that when we talk about God wanting you to be rich, when you're producing something of high value, it's really about how you're giving it back to the exact way God created you to have dominion in this world. So there's three things you got to do to be fruitful. Number one, I should say three characteristics of bearing good fruit. Number one, it reflects the character of the tree. So if we're made in God's image and he is the vine and we are the branches, and I might be saying it backwards, but y'all roll with me. He's the vine dresser and every branch in me. So he's the branch and we're the fruit. So the character of the tree is reflected by what gets produced by that tree. So an apple comes from a what? An apple tree. A lemon comes from what? A lemon tree. So when you see a rotten lemon, don't you think there's like probably something wrong with that vine? That vine might need to be cut, especially if you see several. So I need you to understand that who you be reflects the character of how you're abiding. So for my clients that I'm blessed to work with, I call this a purpose system because I want you to get this. It's one thing for you to understand your purpose. By the way, this is where I was lacking, let alone the other two places I'm going to tell you. I had none of the other two. I thought I did though. It's one thing for you to understand your purpose. Many people walk around having this vague understanding of what their purpose is. So you might be at 5% of what your purpose is. You might even be at 20%. Let's say you're at 60%, when there's another 40% available for you that you haven't and can't tap into because you can't see the label from inside the jar. I see this happen so much. See, the work in God's image is to bear good fruit. But if you're not clear on the image, you're reflecting the purpose that's in you. See that little piece of purpose God put in you? That is that little piece of God in you. That's the way you're meant to affect change in this world. And so you got to look at what are you producing from it. And if you're not producing, that means you're not clear. That means you don't have a strategy. So what do I mean by that? You can't just go buy an apple tree seed in let's say Home Depot and just plant it and water it. There's a strategy around watering that tree. Now, listen, I remember when I first moved into a house with my husband, I was so excited to have my first home. I went and bought these beautiful pink flowers. I was so excited, planted them. And those of you that know me, you know I'm not an outdoor girl at all. So as I was digging the dirt, I was like, don't let me see a worm. Don't let me see a worm. So I planted the flowers, so excited, put the dirt back on it, watered it. Those flowers are dead in 2 days because I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have the right strategy for what that flower. That's what many people do around their purpose. Just because you see somebody else doing something the way they're doing it, their purpose isn't made to be your purpose. So that means you're not going to produce a good result because you do not know how to bear fruit from your purpose. Y'all get that? That's why, in my humble opinion, having a coach is so important. And I'm saying that for my own journey. Listen, I was teaching at not just at adjunct faculty, I was teaching at a graduate school level. And I still listen. And what I was teaching were classes too. I was teaching people how to produce programs. I taught at USC for almost 5 years. I moved to Boston. I didn't even apply for the job in Boston. My dean of school social work in LA said, "Hey, how come I don't see you on the roster?" And I told her I moved to Boston. She called Boston University. They called and offered me a job. I'm not saying it to brag. I'm saying I'm letting you know how doggone good I was. And yet my business was failing because I didn't know how to produce. I was using the same system that I was using here over here. And you've heard me say this if you've been in my camp, the tools you've used on this level are not sufficient for your next. So I kept failing. And I wasn't abiding to understand who God created me to be. The second thing is fruit is visible. So I said this a few minutes ago. You know the fruit, if the fruit is bearing, or excuse me, no, if the tree is producing good results by the fruit that it bears. There's a Bible verse that says you will know them by the fruit that they bear. The fruit is visible. So the thing I think is interesting is so many people walk around, they have no visibility strategy. Again, you do what other people do is not in alignment with who you be. It's not going to help people see you as their answer. It's just not. And you got to understand the purpose systemic strategy or purpose methodology that's right for your purpose to create a whole system around it. And then from that, build the visibility strategy. What do I mean by that? You know, they say build it and people will come. That's not true. Matter of fact, I was talking to a colleague earlier today, and he was telling me that one of his clients had this whole sales page built. They had this whole program built, and nobody was buying. And he said they were upset because they spent like 30, 40,000 and nobody was buying. You know why nobody was buying it? They had no visibility strategy. And I asked him, I said, so how were they leading people to it? He said they weren't. And so many people don't tell you that only 2% convert. So if you want to get to a certain number, how do you make that conversion happen? Not to make money, because there's people that need you. And if you can't let them see you as their answer, they'll never hire you, which means, of course, you can say leaving money on the table, but really you're leaving transformation behind. You got to understand, Pete, there are a group of people assigned to you. When you were born, it's like your gift is a magnet. And only you have the answer for that group of people. And every day that you play small, that you don't build a visibility strategy, you don't let people see you as their answer, you're holding up their answer prayer. So fruit is visible, unless you know the health of the tree, and also lets people see you as their answer. The third thing is fruit is productive or is produced to benefit other people. It ain't about you. See, rich, when you're looking at it from a material perspective, it's about you because you want all this money because you want to buy all the bling, you want to buy the Bentley, you want to buy the big house. I'm not saying you can't do those things, but I am saying that shouldn't be your focus. To me, those are things that you might gift yourself because you work really hard. But that shouldn't be your focus. Your focus shouldn't be seen, and I want people to see me in my fur coat. Matter of fact, what's so interesting is my mother-in-law gave me my fur coat. So mine's technically a hand-me-down. And I don't care because I'm not doing what I do to be seen. I don't care if it's gone through the generations of the family. I don't care about none of that. But some people do. And matter of fact, she told me that somebody was offended when she tried to give them. I said, "Oh, baby, I'm never going to be offended when you gift me with something. Give it all to me." Because I'm not doing it for the wrong reasons. I want you to get that. I always think God is blessing me with this thing because of how hard I worked. Matter of fact, the story just popped in my mind. I remember when I first moved to Massachusetts, and I'm from California, y'all. So I was like, I need to get an SUV because I got to learn how to drive in the snow. And I remember going to Mazda to get, this was back in, what year was that? Whenever the Mazda SUV first came out. Was that 2012, maybe 2013? I don't remember. But I'm sitting in Mazda, and the man looks at me, goes, "Go next door. You're gonna get the same residual value." Next door was BMW, and I'm like, I can't get a BMW. I can't do that. So I go over to BMW, and why was my monthly payment the same? But I still felt guilty. See, I didn't know my worth. Again, what does rich mean? Having high value. And if you can't see your worth, why would your client see your worth? And so I left that BMW dealer saying, well, you know what? I can't get a BMW. I felt guilty and conflicted for wanting a BMW. When the man at the Mazda place is the one that said it, I got home. I started figuring out, okay, if I keep my car, that's a lease. If I buy my car, I start calculating, do you know my car to keep it would have been more than that BMW? And here's what my husband said, would you stop limiting God's ability? God is trying to bless you. Would you let him bless you? You deserve that car. You work really, really hard. And so for many of you, Part of the reason why you can't make this shift and understand that your gift is an answer, you can't charge what you're worth, you won't build the business, you won't do the work, and even invest in you is because you don't see the value that's tied to your gift, not for you. So any coach I hire, and I have coaches now, both health, mental, I always have a counselor on speed dial. I have a coach helping me in my business. I have an advisory board now that I've built to help me in my business. I do all those things because here's what I know. Every time I invest in growing me, I bless every person I get to coach, which ultimately is a blessing to God because as every person I get to coach and teach does the thing they're gifted to do, I am also a part of that producing good results because they get to bless their clients and their clients get to bless their clients and so on and so on and so on. I'm a part of that system. Y'all get that? So here's the thing I think is so I got to say this because when I talk about rich or wealth or money, First Timothy 6:10 says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." The love of money. But when you abide in God and you're doing things because you love God and you want to give God a great return on His investment in you, that's a different perspective, y'all. That allows you to produce fruit for the kingdom. And when I'm talking about the kingdom, I'm talking about the world. You know, we all live in this thing called the world, which ultimately is God. He created the world. This is His domain, ultimately. And as we produce good results, we're giving back to grow the kingdom the way God intended. Okay. So as we end this conversation, let me end with a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to focus on John 15:2 that says, "Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes that it bear more fruit." So two things. Again, every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. The point. If you're doing what you're doing for selfish reasons, you know, anything you do, what they say for God doesn't last. Oh, that stuff crashes and burns. When you have the wrong motive, I've talked to you about this in another series. I'm not going to dig into this, but I want you to get this. When you have a selfish, ulterior motive, oh, things start to fall apart at some point. I've seen it happen over and over again. The second part of that Bible verse says, "And every branch that bears fruit, He prunes that it may bear more fruit." Listen, when I just told you my story at the top of this, that I was going through a challenge in my business. Now I had a little bit of fruit, little bit, but I was going through that challenge because God was pruning me. Had I not stopped long enough to do what it took to grow my gift, I would have never had the next level of bearing fruit that I have right now. And even now, and as I'm learning and growing and learning new things and expanding my territory, God prunes you and challenges you to grow you. And you've heard me say this, your comfort and your conviction cannot coexist. So many people want it to be comfortable when you are being challenged to grow. It's not going to be comfortable because it's something you've never done before. Me hiring that first coach for 30,000, I didn't know how I was going to make that payment. But I also knew if I didn't do that, I wouldn't grow. I knew if I didn't risk it all, I would never gain it all. I knew, listen, I'm going to trust you, God. I'm going to trust you because I know that you led me to this woman. Because I can't trust me, I can't trust her, but I can trust him. And I did whatever it took. And that's why I went from 13,000 to 200,000 in 6 months. So I want you to understand that when you're going through a challenging place in your business, it doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. That's why you got to be clear and have a purpose system. You've got to have a visibility system. I didn't say this part. Your whole fruit that's being produced means you have a back end system and a sales system. Those are the four systems you have to have in your business to be fruitful, period. Purpose system, visibility system, back end system, and a sales system. Okay. So I need you to understand this. When you're being pruned, so say you have all those things at play, like the client, my colleague was talking to me about earlier today, that person did not have a visibility system, which means that our sales system and our backend system was off. Because if you don't have all four, it's like the wheels of a car. So if one of your wheels is off, the whole car rolling of your car is out of alignment. Y'all with me? So you can't bear fruit if one of those wheels is not properly aligned. So anytime you're having a challenge in one of those four areas, it means one, you don't have the right strategy in place. And two, God just maybe it worked for a while, which is great. Doesn't mean that, oh, I need to shift my business. It means God is challenging you. It's time to grow that area. It's time to scale. Or for those of you that haven't made predictable revenue yet, you don't have all four areas at play. And I really need you to understand before we talk about multiply, which will be in part two. I'll tell you, we're going to talk about that. I need you to understand where you're off because ultimately, if you don't have all these four systems at play, this is why you're not producing fruit. And if you're not producing fruit, you can't be highly productive. If you're not producing fruit, you're not going to have high value, which is what rich is. It's rich in benefit for God. And ultimately, when you benefit God, He's always going to give some back to you. He's always going to say, great, my good and faithful servant. Let me hook you up. I've seen God do that over and over again in my life. So I want you to think about a couple of things as we end this part one of this conversation. Number one, do you know the arena or niche that God has called you to be fruitful in? Now I say niche because I hear people say like, I'm a business coach. That's not a niche. I hear people say like, I'm a health trainer. That's not a niche. The more specific you can be, the more people can be served by you because then they can hear that you are their answer. Okay. Are you in alignment to producing good results? Because I need you to get, if you're not in alignment with that arena and then doing work that's only in alignment with that and stop doing what you see other people doing and stop thinking, oh, well, this isn't working. Let me try something different. Let me shift this. Let me shift this. Let me do this other thing. I see so many people that keep shifting with the wind, which means you're out of alignment. So I need you to get clear is if you're out of alignment. hmm So that you can go beyond good, beyond great, and go after the significance that God has that's tied to your gift. And again, it's not just about you. So stop making it about you. It's about all the people that are looking for you. See, that rich, again, is rich in benefit for them, which then ends up being a benefit for you as well. Okay. So we're going to go deeper into multiply tomorrow, but I want you to remember that rich means highly productive, having high value or quality. And I'm going to talk to you about this more, but I'm working on something special for you. And I'll tell you about that. I'll tell you about that in part two. But here's what I want you to know when I'm talking about rich. See, rich means you have a rhythm and consistent harmony. So that's what rich stands for me. Rhythm is R, in consistent harmony. Because here's what you have to know. When your purpose when you're clear on your purpose and you're in this niche, you're in a groove, it's a rhythm. And then you got to be consistent with it. So if I go back to that tree example, you can't water a tree once. You've got to be consistent and continue to water it over and over and over and over again. It's not a one time thing, it's an all the time thing. And it's the harmony between you and God that begins to happen. That's that abiding. I've seen God pour so much into me when I'm in alignment with his assignment, not when what I want or what my flesh wants or what the world says, but what he says. The more aligned I get, the more harmony I get, not just with him, but all the clients that need me. So that's ultimately what I mean when I'm talking about rich. It's a rhythm and consistent harmony. That's my goal for you. I'm going to tell you about something I've been working on to support you in that wherever you are stuck. So in the meantime, I want you to ask yourself this last question, and we'll talk about multiply in part two because this was fruitful, and I'll tell you about the training that I'm gifting you. But listen, think about whether you're working to produce fruit that benefits others, or are you only focused on what benefits you. That's where I want to end. Is I really want you to think about, are you doing what you do to benefit you? Or is it to benefit other people? And are you clear on who those other people are? So as you know, we do part two tomorrow in Clubhouse, fppbreakfast.com. The reason I love to do part two and not do it all, first of all, I always want to be here for about 30 minutes because I know y'all are busy. It's the evening, you just got home from work. But number two, I can hear you in Clubhouse. So I want to hear you. I want you to bring your questions. I want to have a great conversation around multiply. I want to have a great conversation around this whole conversation about rich. And even a mindset shift that I'm even challenge you to look at you being rich in a different way. Not in a materialistic, what the world says you should acquire things, but ultimately how you bring that back to God. Listen, this whole series is about your work being important to God. And what's interesting, if you really think about it, if you go back and look in Genesis 2, there were two arenas that God called Adam and Eve into work in. It was a physical way where he talked about keeping the plants and all that stuff, but it was also an intellectual property way where he was telling them to name things. And so although that was very simplistic for back then, those are the two arenas God has called us in now too. But you've got to be specific with what area you were created to dwell in. So I look forward to having that conversation with you. I look forward to peeling back more. I look forward to telling you about what I've been working on just for you tomorrow. So don't miss it. fppbreakfast.com, 8:30 a.m. Usually 30 minutes. I share, Yolanda from my team shares, and then we listen and hear from you as I pour into you. Fruitful was part one, multiply is part two. So I'll talk to you about multiply tomorrow, all right? So with that said, it's my honor and pleasure to be here with you every week. So one thing I want to ask, if you got any value, hit that share button below, whether you're watching it live or watching a replay, and tell somebody else to join us, all right? So until part two, I'll see you tomorrow, y'all. Bye.